Thank you all so much for joining us for the Gpsa sponsorship workshop. Joining us today are Sid Kaputokwa, PhD student, graduate assistant, Gpsa student body vice president, and Nias Mercina, Gpsa manager and advisor. They're going to be discussing Gpsa sponsorship opportunities and providing you with tips on how to successfully complete the application process. So I'm going to hand it over to them to get us started.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I'll share the presentation with you. Let me make it full screen. Can you see all the full screen or just the other one? Okay, full screen. So yes, as Neil and I mentioned that I'm the vice president of the Gpsa, and furthermore, I'm the chair of the sponsorship committee. So we will go through how to apply for Gpsa funding and tips to make your application great. And finally, we will go to question and answers session. So purpose of this workshop is threefold. First one is learn about Gpsa sponsorship, deadlines, and other information. And secondly, provide information about application process and how applications are scored. And lastly, the review examples to learn more about scoring individual applications. So here we provide some useful links. The first one is for our Gpsa homepage. Second one is for information about the executive board, and then the council links lists our bylaws, constitution, and the representative from each department. If you want to know more about your department representative, you can find the list in this page. And most importantly, sponsorship link is given here. We have two physical locations. We still do. The main one we are using is the graduate common, is still open, and we have an office at SU, but it's not being used at the moment because of the pandemic. Moving on, so each student is eligible for $1,250 per year for through Gpsa funding for research and travel. And we have 4 cycles. I will go give more details about them later, and 1 emergency cycle. So you are eligible to apply for 3 awards per year, including 1 emergency award. Moving on, we have a budget of 175,000 available. This year we allocated this amount, but because of the pandemic, we didn't get that many applications, so we allocated this funding for our emergency grant and Gpsa research forum that it is coming up, things like that. So the goal of our sponsorship committee is to fund as many eligible applications as possible, but most importantly based on their quality. Moving on, the 4 cycles are listed here. They are listed. They are given as fall, winter, spring, and summer. And you are here for the summer cycle, and our deadline is coming up. It is March 15th. You can apply for this summer cycle for activities occurring in May, June, and July. And I mentioned about the emergency cycle. It is not given here, but I will give you a brief introduction for that. So emergency cycle is a cycle that if you are not, if it's an emergency, say that you couldn't apply for the May, June, and July cycle before the March deadline. So you are eligible to apply during emergency cycle. Emergency cycles are throughout every month. So deadline is the 20th of every month for the emergency cycle. So moving on, the application, it is a Qualtrics application. You can find it through our web page. Let me close this for now and show you where to find it. And let me share my browser. All right. So if you see the Google browser? Okay. So if you Google Gpsa UNLV, you will get this result. You can go to our Cortex form in 3 ways. So first, easiest one is click on this sponsorship link. So it will go to this page. General information are given and the links are given in here. So for some reason, if you click on this one, so you can see all the awards we are giving out. And if you click on this link, you will go back to this page. Similarly, if you go to the home page, you can navigate through this hamburger icon and funding and opportunities resources and go to here. I will open the application and show you how it looks like. We will ask your first name, last name, NC ID, rebellion, and some more things. I cannot move forward without giving answers to this. So I will show you those things later on. Let me close that and reshare the presentation. Okay. So if you fill out the basic information, you will come to these parts. So we will be asking you for 4 documents. First one is explanation of activities, and then the budget, then the supporting documents for the budget, and then advisor approval for advisor approval. Until this year, we ask you to submit a letter of recommendation from advisor, but we got rid of that. So from now on, it's once you submit your application, we will send an email to your advisor automatically, and they will fill out a application approving your application. It's simple. And for emergency cycle, they have to submit the recommendation letter, but you don't have to contact them or ask a recommendation letter. We will ask them. So moving on, more about the explanation of activity. It should be a concise summary of your project, and it should be limited to 1 page. Concise summary is as research. If it's a research, say what your abstract and your research project, and then the presentation. If it's a presentation, if you're going to a conference, say what you're presenting and things like that. Please avoid jargon, because the sponsorship committee has 7 members, including me. The other members are coming from different departments. So maybe if you are from, say, education, we don't have someone from education representing the sponsorship committee. So if you use some jargon from education, we won't be able to understand. So you might lose some points if you use jargons in the rubric, based on the rubric. So please avoid jargon, and always proofread your document. Then you need to give a significance of the project, and then broad impact for your project for Gpsc, UNLV, and the UNLV broader community, and your field. And finally, timeline. This timeline for if it's a research project, timeline for your research project, and if it's a if you're going to a conference, the timeline for your conference, not your project. Yes. And then moving on to the budget part, we ask it to be itemized and detailed, accurate, and then you need to justify your items, and then you need to submit supporting documents. So the budget usually looks like this. So this column contains the items. This example is traveling application. So airfare, lodging, transportation, and per diem. I will talk about per diem later on because we do not give funding for per diem. But you can always include it to the itemized budget. And you need to describe each item and then the unit cost, total cost, and the requesting amount from the Gpsa. This should be well detailed as said here and accurate. We always I see a question. I will get back to that later. And yes, it should be accurate because we always calculate the amount from here and check whether it's accurate or not. And for supporting document, I will show you here. This is not a great example because the amount is same, but the flight details are different. So usually we ask you to choose the most less expensive item, and if you choose something a little bit expensive than the cheapest item, we ask you to justify your reasoning for choosing the little bit expensive item. And for the lodging, we personally prefer if you submit a map like Google Map like this, so we can easily see the cost. Also, you can submit something like this. Make sure you when you're submitting a screenshot, make sure include the dates related to these prices. And then for this is the conference registration. So you need to, if you are asking money from us for your student registration, you need to submit something like this. We always fund for the early registration for students. If you are asking for regular registration, we won't be able to fund that. We always fund the early registration fee. So make sure to ask for the early registration fee. Not on supporting documents. So you need to always submit supporting document for items you are requesting. If it's a traveling application, you need to submit at least 2 supporting documents, and if it's a research project, you need to submit at least 1 supporting item. And if you submit a bill, a receipt, a bill as a supporting document, we do not consider it as a supporting document. And moving on, advice application, like I mentioned earlier. So starting from last year, this academic year, so we send out a email after you submit your application. It's automatically set up in the Qualtrics, and the later your advisor is receiving something like this, and they need to approve your application. They will receive your application and they will approve your application. And these are the non-covered items. I mentioned we do not fund for per diem and salaries and services for volunteer compensation. So Mia will be able to talk about this part in detail later on. And these are the items we do not support. And you can find this in our web page under operating policies right next to your application. And this is the scoring rubric. We have a details rubric in our website. You will be able to find it again in the operating policy. If you scroll down, you will see the scoring rubric in detail. This is just the rubric we are using for scoring for easy use. And as stated here, this 1 mark is for cover sheet. If make sure you fill out the details correctly. You will lose point here if you include, say you are requesting $900 from in the budget, but by mistake if you include say something like 1,000 in your cover sheet, you will lose some points for that, partial points. And the tier levels, I will talk about tier levels later. We have three levels. And then the explanation of activity details are given in the rubric. Please go through the rubric and operating policies before you are submitting an application. And these are given in the rubric too. So this is a simple rubric we are using. Here are the tiers. So tier 1 is a research application for materials or travel. But I mean, if you're going to a different site to collect your samples, that's considered as a research project. We include it as a tier 1. And tier 2 is conference, travel for presentation, scholarly activity. And you can request money for conference that you are going but not presenting. We categorize it as a tier 3. Moving on, some application tips. Include all necessary components. If you didn't submit, if you're missing explanation of activity, we consider it as an incomplete application and reject your application. We don't even go through your application. So always submit all the necessary components and proofread. Have someone outside your area of expertise read your explanation of activities because of the jargon. As I mentioned earlier, we only have 7 members from different colleges, and I can give you, so I'm from medical physics, and we have someone from brain health, and someone from criminal justice, life sciences, chemistry and biochemistry, anthropology, and lastly, mechanical engineering. So if you are outside from those 7 fields, please avoid jargons. So you might lose some points because sometimes we don't understand what you're talking about. So ensure that your budget is organized, itemized, justified, and support with supporting documents. If you fail to submit some supporting material for one item, you only submit 1 supporting documents, you will lose partial points. So always submit at least 2 for travel and 1 for research. If you cannot find the supporting material, say if you are applying for a research material and you cannot find any other supporting document, like, so if you are asking for some chemical and you need to get that chemical from certain company and you couldn't find any other company that produced that chemical, you can justify that. If you cannot find the supporting documents, please justify, and you won't be able to, you won't lose any point for your application for that. Always justify and always submit supporting document, and then follow the guidelines on the website. We have a detailed list in the operating policies, and examples are given in the operating policies as well, apart from the rubric. Moving on, upcoming deadline, you know this one is March 15th for the activities occurring in May, June, and July. So you might have some question after funding cycles. Maybe you didn't get the amount you requested, or your application was rejected. As I mentioned earlier, if something is missing from your document, we consider it as incomplete application and reject the application completely. You might lose partial point for your budget, supporting documents because of supporting document not included. You ask for non-covered items such as per diem and participation compensation for your participants, things like that. We always give you comments in your letters, so it started this academic year. We usually didn't give your comments from the committee before. We started doing it now, so you will have a better idea why you get less funding or reject the application. Moving on to reimbursement. This part is handled by our manager, Nia. I invite you to take over from this part.
All right, so you guys have all attended this workshop, which means that you are now experts on sponsorship and you are going to submit fantastic applications and that will all get funded. So now we're at the phase where you've completed your travel or your research event and you need to get reimbursed. So typically when you do travel expenses, so there's research-based travel and there's conference-based travel, and those are the two main categories of actually travel. So you will fund that with your own credit card or your own funding method, but it has to be out in your name. And Gpsa will reimburse you in the form of a scholarship. So with that scholarship restriction, you have to maintain a 3.0 GPA and be enrolled in 6 credit hours in order to get that scholarship through financial aid to get that reimbursement. And we can apply it to different semesters throughout the academic year to make sure that we are able to get you reimbursed. But in order to get that reimbursement, you must provide me with 2 examples of proof of attendance. So for example, if you go to a conference and you get the letter that you registered for that conference, that letter would be great. If you go to the conference and they give you participation documents, that's even better. Send that on over. If you have a hotel folio or a car rental receipt, these are all things that are absolutely perfect to get reimbursed with. As for mileage, just show your odometer readings. We can't actually use gas receipts. We just need the odometer readings. We bill per mile. And then submit that to gpsa@unlv.edu and we can take care of the reimbursement. Typically, they take anywhere from, I've seen reimbursements go through as quickly as 2 weeks, those are rare, and then sometimes they can take up to 2 months. It really just depends. All right, next slide, please. Oh, you already did it. Look at you. Okay. So purchasing supplies. So for people who do material purchases, so for example, to give the example of chemicals, and there's a certain chemical that you need for your research project, and you've submitted your budget, and you've had your department purchase those items for you. So this is where travel and research materials really differ. So for travel expenses, you're funding that cost up front and then getting reimbursed by Gpsa. If you have an actual material item, that material item must be purchased by your department using the department's purchasing card. If anybody has questions about purchasing cards, typically the administrative assistants in the offices would have those, or the graduate coordinators do usually have purchasing cards, but that's who need, or your advisor, for example, these are the folks who would need to fund your material purchase. And then all they have to do is what's called reconcile their P card, their purchasing card, against the Gpsa account number. So typically, this is a really common process and they're familiar with it. If they're not familiar with it, you can just present them with your award letter that you will get from Gpsa, and it lays out the details about how they can reimburse themselves on their P card, reconcile their P card on that letter. So it should also mention that participants, so we cannot fund people. And what I mean by that is if you have a project and you're trying to recruit participants for your project and you are trying to incentivize people to take part in your study, we can't directly fund people with monetary, with actual cash. We can't use gift cards, but there is a way around this. The best tactic that IRB actually recommends is when people are trying to incentivize people to come into the study, you can buy small gift items. I can't remember what the largest amount is. It's like $50 or less, something like that. So like T-shirts, other gift items to incentivize people, or like another person has a study in Jamaica and they bought phone cards, for example. These would be items that you could buy with a departmental P card and then reconcile against the Gpsa account. But actual gift cards or things of like cash value, we can't do. And that's due to university policies as well as IRB policies, and there's privacy risks. So it's very, very messy, and we just really can't do it. It's really hard to get around that. So that's the alternative if you would like to do to incentivize people to buy gifts for them. But that is the bulk of the reimbursement process. Oh, and the other thing is we would really like for people to try and get that reimbursement in as quickly as possible. We can't have these funds sitting out. So if it needs to be within the fund, preferably within the same cycle, We understand that some projects tend to go longer, but really try not to go over 12 months. Try to get those reimbursements in as soon as you can, because we want to make sure that you can pay off your cards and that our funds get used appropriately. Thank you. Other questions?
Thank you. So I got a question directly in my chat here, and it's if we are still waiting to be accepted to a conference or external research internship, are we still able to apply? And additionally, what happens if we are not accepted for the opportunity but are awarded the funding? What are the policies?
Excellent question. Sid, do you want to take it or do you want me to take it?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right. Actually, this is an extremely common question, and so I'm glad that you asked it. So if you have a conference that you're interested in, apply for Gpsa funding. Please, please apply, even if you haven't been accepted yet. Go ahead and submit your application, and if you get that funding, fantastic, everything's in a row. If you end up not, just simply send us an email, and we can rescind that you need to rescind the funding, and we can just mark that in our books. But it's very difficult. We can't fund your conference if you get accepted later and it's outside of the deadlines. We really want to make sure that you can get that funding ahead of time. So get those applications in.
Yes, to answer Charlie's question that for does Gpsc have any preference requirement that the applicant applied for funding elsewhere? I know that some funding entities have this preference. Actually, we do not have preference like that, so you can apply for funding to for Gpsc as long as it's within our limits. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Speaking of the limits, so make sure do not apply over 1250 limit. So we tend to reduce points if you apply more than 1250 because you didn't follow our guidelines. Yeah.
So we had another question here. What does tier level mean?
Yes, so tier level. So as I mentioned, we have 3 levels. So tier 1 is if you are applying for research materials. So research materials covers for something if you are from chemistry or by life science, if you are using some lab equipments or chemicals, you can we can if you are applying for those materials, we consider as research materials. For that goes to your thesis or dissertation project. And for other one is research travel. That is, if you are if you are from geology, so you need to go to a different site to collect your samples. So if you are applying for that travel course, it's considered as a research travel. So that those are the things we consider as tier 1. And the tier 2 is the cost allocated to conference travel when you are presenting. If you are not presenting but just attending, we consider it as a tier 3. You can apply for tier 3. If we don't have that many applications, we still fund you. But if you don't, if we have a tier 1 and tier 3 application and our budget exceed, we might not be able to fund tier 3 applications. Yes, yeah, and we always give priority to tier 1 first, and then tier 2, then finally tier 3.
Thank you, Sid. So what happens if you're planning to travel abroad in fall of 2021 and are given funding, but then have to push travel back into spring 2021 because of COVID? Does, I think spring 2022, does that funding transfer or will I have to reapply?
It's a common question we get. If you are happy with the amount you receive, and sorry, the noise is from my apartment complex, so I'm sorry. So if you're happy with the amount you receive from Gpsa and your budget doesn't change when you are traveling in the future, you can always use that funding. But if your budget change and it increase, we cannot give you more funding, only the amount you are approved for. So my suggestion is apply again. Yeah. And Nia might be able to answer that more easily. I mean, it's a common question we are getting, right?
It is a common question. And I mean, it goes a little bit on a case-by-case basis. So kind of as Sid mentioned, I mean, if your project really hasn't changed at all and it just simply got reallocated to a different time frame, we might ask you to send it a new budget in case anything changed, and you can do a modification request form, which we also have on the website. But if it's really kind of done an overhaul and completely changed, then we would ask you to reapply. I hope that was clear. Does that answer the question, Sarah?
Yes, thank you.
Please feel free to unmute yourselves or chat any of your questions in our chat. I'll give you all some time to think about it, but please feel free to ask them while we have them here. They're the experts in this area.
Actually, I have the application up right here if you want me to walk y'all through the application without the validation. You can see that. Okay, great. Here, I'll throw it up.
That'd be great.
Okay, can you guys see the screen? Perfect. All right, so this is the, let's see if I can go back to my own landing page. No, I am not. There we are. All right, so the March 15th deadline application, you can find this on the Gpsa website. I can go navigate myself to that just to show you one more time. You can go to the Gpsa homepage. It's unlv.edu/Gpsa. Go to funding and opportunities, travel and research sponsorship, learn more, and here's our sponsorship page. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. March 15th is the deadline for activities starting in May, June, and July. And I'm going, so we have the travel application, and then we have the research application. This is the application if you're applying for research materials. So I'll just go ahead and, so if you click on that, it'll take you to the application. So I have a preview up in Qualtrics over here that lets me walk through without actually filling in the details. So we need your first name, last name, we need your entry number, your Rebel mail, so your unlv.nevada.edu email, please. You select your school and your department, your degree. Go ahead and move on forward. When you were admitted to your program, when you're graduating, we need you to include your advisor's information. As Sid mentioned, we used to ask for a recommendation letter from your advisor. We've actually eliminated that step, and now it's simply advisor approval. So they're going to get an email please enter your advisor's email correctly on this application. They're going to get an email that says, yes, I approve my student. She should be getting funding from Gpsa. What you're actually applying for, how much money you want. Please don't request more than $1,250. Again, as Sid mentioned, we frown upon people who are trying to ask for money beyond our guidelines. Your project title, where you're collecting data. This is for the research application, by the way. Or if you're conference traveling, and then what dates. And we understand again that some projects don't have a clear end date. Please type in the best of your ability what dates you think your project's going to happen within. And if it's part of your thesis, so if this is actually part of your thesis, dissertation, or culminating project, that would elevate it to tier 1. And if you've previously applied for funding, please indicate that. We do keep a record, but it helps us to have that in the application. If you've received money from other funding sources, this actually goes back to the other question that was asked. We do want to know if you've asked for other funding sources. So sometimes, for example, your department might have funding, like for example, the sociology department typically offers us $300 to help with conference travel. Please mention that. We would like to know about that. It gives us some due diligence.
Yeah, but it doesn't affect your scoring when we are calculating your score or scoring your application. It doesn't affect even you mentioned or you didn't mention it. We actually just asking whether you have other funding in case we have to reduce your money because of our budget going over. So otherwise, it doesn't affect your score, anything.
So you can go through, and then we just ask that you seeing that we do have Nevada open meeting law requires that people being discussed in open meetings, which are all the GPSA meetings, are subject to Nevada open meeting law. If there's a quorum of the GPSA committees, you know, I don't want to go into all those details. I don't want to bore you guys to death, but we just do ask that you sign this. So that way we can go ahead and discuss your application at this meeting. And then you can go ahead and click through, and we will then let you upload your materials as a separate document. So you don't have to fill in any text boxes here. This is just a drag and drop of your documents for your application. So your explanation of activities, we need your itemized budget. We also have links within the application so you can see specific examples. There are examples on the website. There's examples within the application itself. So you can look and see what materials you need and really try to build your application to the guidelines. We really try to make it as easy as possible. And y'all, if you have questions though, please email gpsa@unlv.edu. So any other supporting documentation that you think would be helpful, we've added several blocks. Don't feel like you need to fill in all of these supporting documentation blocks. You just want to make them available to people, and then go ahead and click submit. And that's it, and then you are done. I can go ahead and stop sharing the screen.
Yeah, I think
Thanks
you
for
have. I think Nia, you have a word letter sample. If you like to share that one too, go ahead.
Of the budget?
Not the budget, the award letter that someone will receive.
Oh, the award letter. Oh, sure. Yeah, let me pull up a template. Great idea. Let me find an award letter template that doesn't have anybody's name on it. Those are the ones we modified. Do we have any other questions while I'm digging for award letters?
Do you know if the Southwestern Airline scholarship, I think there was a scholarship, if that's coming back or not? I didn't know if it was suspended right now because of COVID, but I hadn't seen anything else about it.
That is a great question. Do you know,
Yeah,
Sid?
that's a great question, but it's not through Gpsa. Maybe graduate college will be able to answer that.
Let me check with our financial department. Who asked that question?
Sarah.
Sarah, can you give me your email so I can make sure to ask our graduate financial services department, and then I can get back to you because they handle our scholarships.
Yes, thank you.
Of course.
Okay, I have a template up here. I'm gonna make sure I'm redacting all the information. Oh, perfect. Way to go, Sid. We've already got it. Okay, so this is a perfect example of one of our letters. So this looks like it was a travel letter. So as you can see, we'll put your name on the application when we send out the notification, and then we let you know the amount that you applied for. So a lot of folks will apply for the full 1250, and then we'll let you know on the second paragraph what the amount is that you actually are awarded. And as we scroll a little bit further down, you can see the reimbursement guidelines right there. That's what you can send into your department if you do the research awards or the material-based awards. This is really helpful to your department so they know that they need to use their P card. And then when they want that account, it's actually PG5900, but that's the account that your department will need. And you can just email me and I can send that right on over so they can reconcile their P cards. And if we keep going, we also try to include, we don't always have it, but we also try to include feedback in the letters as well, so you can see ways to improve your application for the next funding cycle. And this is the detailed piece about the travel reimbursement. So these are some examples of the things you can submit, the 2 types of evidence that you can submit. And again, if there's anything that you have done that might seem outside of these examples, please just shoot me an email and I can let you know whether or not that would qualify as the materials for the reimbursement.
Thank you, Nia.
Thanks for showing that.
Any other questions?
So I got a question touted to me. Where would an external internship fall under based on the tiers?
Do you need your internship funded? Can you give more details?
Hello, sorry. I'm trying to do an internship with Yale, and they're not going to fund the travel to get over there. So that's what I'm trying to wonder. Am I able to, or potentially, is it possible?
Oh, so traveling to a location for your internship. So if it's not related to your progress through your degree, it will consider as a tier 3. So based on the application we received during that cycle, you might not get funded, but you can always apply.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
All right, guys. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions for us right now, or if you think of some later, here I'll put the general email into the chat. So you guys can please feel free to shoot these to any inquiries to us directly there.
Thank you so much, Sidania, for sharing this. This was super informative for everyone and for answering all these questions. And thanks to all the participants for joining us today. Before everyone logs off, if you just don't mind taking 1 minute to fill out this feedback survey, this just helps us improve the workshops we offer throughout the semester, so we would appreciate that. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, guys.